Opium, alcohol, sugar, tobacco. Every generation has had its unethical poison pushed upon it by the top 1% so they can continue to make profits, and the working class can continue to do just that, keep working. But so what's next? Gen Z are oddly not drinking anymore, but they're also kind of smoking again, and millennials not smoking at all compared to their boomer parents. Is your attention span going to be the next thing to suffer though? Is content in itself the next opioid forced upon the masses? And what role then do content creators play? Where do content creators stand within that vicious cycle? As the platforms that we post to continue to edge further and further to fascism every week, is the content that we're putting on there alongside the AI slop either side of this farm now still as ethical as it used to be? And therefore today's question becomes, is content creation itself still ethical?
An alarming increase in young people with gambling issues.
That was my first introduction to gambling.
Deeply concerned about the effects of sugar on the body.
Internet gaming addiction.
The relationship between LGBTQ plus spaces and alcohol is a complicated and bittersweet one.
Hooked on Instagram as a young kid.
Do you worry about social media addiction?
Kind of looks a lot like what happened to big tobacco 50 years ago.
I would wake up in the morning, swig some vodka just to get myself up.
She's going to drink.
A functioning alcoholic, that's what I was.
Sugar,
tobacco,
gambling,
alcohol,
social media addiction.
So there are some terms that I want to kind of open with because I'm going to kind of create them as I go, but they are self-explanatory. Content consumption is obviously the physical consumption of any media. For example, you watching this video, watching reels on Instagram or even posts on things like Tumblr or Reddit. You're still consuming content in a way that's designed to be seen or viewed by in some form by someone. Content creation is obviously the other side of that. So me standing in front of this camera now and putting this media out there on a platform is creating that content for someone to see. I also think there should be a word like content consent. Do you consent to this content? Specifically when it gets to anything like aimed at adults, but in general, like, do we consent to the adverts put in front of us? Just like we would talk about passive smoking, like if someone put AI on in front of you and forced you to watch it, you didn't consent to watching that kind of content. I know that's a very nebulous idea, but we're going to need that kind of paradigm for this essay. And then also content addiction. Are we addicted to content itself? Any of the definitions of what addiction is can very much define some of the ways we use and abuse content, and that's kind of the point of this essay. I'll get more into that throughout the entire essay, but content addiction as a term as well, I'm going to kind of throw out there, and it's being addicted to the act of watching content. Let's start with sugar. Specifically processed sugar. Things like sucrose, high fructose corn syrup. Sugar as a chemical has come a long way since it was first, I don't want to say invented, but mass produced. The reason that we had such atrocities like the slave trade was because sugar was in high demand from countries that could make it, and compared to countries that wanted it. Specifically, I think the British Empire, the demand was so high that it forced one of the biggest tragedies of history, the slave trade. Sugar is an unnecessary element to food. Food can of course have natural sugars, and when we're talking about this, we're not talking about the natural fructose that exists in apples, but to have a sugar-coated apple gummy is not a necessity for human life to live. The increase of processed sugars in our diet is also linked to the diabetes crisis happening in Western cultures, and it's being spread to other cultures as well across the world. Diabetes, type 2 specifically, that is created as a result of ingesting too much sugary foods, is an issue that we're facing with modern day society. One of the most insidious parts of the sugar debate for me is how it's in everything, and it's really hard to know that sometimes, and it's in way more than people would assume. Even the healthier foods, it's marketed as healthy and good for you, but it has just as much sugar in as other things. Even I see it in like frozen peas in the supermarket or in salads and stuff, and it's like, why does that need to have sugar? And in modern day life as well, because our taste buds adjust and acclimatize to such sweeter foods, it has to be added to keep things palatable across the board. So this is an absolute, akujunkan. What's the English for akujunkan? A vicious cycle. It's a vicious cycle that's just going to keep getting worse and worse until there's so much sugar in our foods that we don't even realize it because we're so acclimatized to it. Like many addictions, there is a tolerance build up in how much we can taste and also ingest sugar. We also need to talk about how organizations and companies and big tobacco, big pharma, big sugar are also a key part of this. Big tobacco probably comes to mind as one of the key examples in history as to when it's documented how organizations were made to keep tobacco in the media, to give any doubt in mind about how healthy it is for you. Going from soldiers in the war being given cigarettes by doctors to marketing ploys to get kids to be smoking as young as possible. There's no denying how innately unethical the tobacco industry has always been and is still to this day. Side note, I watched the film Thank You for Smoking in preparation for this video. Editing me, add some clips in if you can. It was the worst film I think I've ever seen because narrative, I think I could do a whole other video about that. Let me know if you would want me to. But the whole film was so America exceptionalist that the villain of the story, the guy working for the tobacco industry, was humanized, given a backstory. His kid literally follows him around on his business trips while he does all of these outrageous things. It gave such a, no pun intended, it left a bad taste in my mouth. It was released in 2006 and it was really, really jarring to see how it was meant to be making so much commentary about this about the tobacco industry, and it was so accepting of everything. It was crazy. Anyway, if you haven't seen that film, don't watch it. If you want me to cover it in like a whole other video, I probably could, but I watched it in preparation for this and I was like irate for a whole other reason. It was like crazy. Doctors were trying to say how bad smoking is for the consumers, and to counteract that, fake science, pseudoscience was given, random data that was picked and chosen to be helpful towards the big tobacco industries, calling for the tobacco farmers to have a say. There were so many levels of marketing and unethical actions that kept tobacco pushed to so many people. There's not mixed words. People died from the tobacco industry and people still do. That film I mentioned starts with the numbers and it's like in the millions, if not billions of people. And I think it's hard for the human brain to kind of grasp just how bad that is. But so the tobacco industry people that created and marketed and sold products that kill people to a mass scale, scaling to into the millions of people, we should be able to comprehend how much worse that is, but it's hard for us to do so because there are so many levels of plausible deniability that are put in place on purpose. But I think anyone that worked in the tobacco industry should have a serious talking to. That's all I'll say. Quick side note, because I just want to talk about smoking. Smoking seems to be making an odd comeback, thanks to pop stars like Charlie XCX and other mainstream celebrities that are seen puffing up again, which from someone in my generation is a really odd sensation to bear witness to. For me, smoking resembles anyone older than me, like boomer age generation, like puffing up even though they know they really shouldn't be. Like smoking has, in my generation, been so depopularized that it's really odd to see it coming back. I remember my mum quitting smoking, my dad, my sister when she got pregnant, and it kind of like a domino effect of everyone realizing that like it's about time that they stopped smoking on a cigarette. It stank, and I remember even as a kid just like the secondhand smoke affecting my life. And I think unlike many of these other like things we're going to talk about today, I think cigarettes particularly, because it did have a passive smoking issue, I think that caught on fire a little bit quicker, pun intended. But so it's odd to see Gen Z kind of bringing back smoking, and it also has this kind of unnerving connection to kind of like conservatism and old money and some of the imagery related to those tropes, which is also another level of kind of odd. What's big tobacco got up its sleeve? I need to know. But in the same vein, data is showing that Gen Z are drinking alcohol far less, causing the closures of pubs and traditional drinking areas. as well as the fact that no one has any money to go drinking outside, so it's either a bottle of wine indoors or nothing at all.
A survey by Tokyo marketing firm Mary found that 44% of Japanese people in their 20s say they never drink alcohol. When you include those who drink less than once a month, the figure rises to nearly 60%.
Which bears the question I always think about, like, in the future, what will generations look back at as something that's really unethical? I mean, AI comes to mind as well. Apparently there are already like Gen Alpha at school saying that's AI, when they're meaning that's fake or that's bad or that's not true, which I think is also kind of like a great thing for me. It's like, oh, the kids are okay. The kids are going to be fine. But so what will future generations deem as unethical and look back at their parents and be like, oh my God, Mum, I can't believe you used to use ChatGPT, or, oh, Mum, I can't believe you used to drink wine. That's so bad for you. And I also want to extend that to like the whole point of this video essay. Like, what if they find out, my future children we're talking about here, catch up. What if my future children are like, you made content for YouTube? Mum, that's so unethical. Like, that's so addictive. I can't believe you made that content. You probably got people hooked to watching content. Like, I genuinely do wonder, because if you think about it from the perspective of people that used to smoke or drink alcohol or all of these things that would be completely normal parts of everyday life and encouraged in many ways in society, we now look at that as completely disgusting and abhorrent. So how can we know for sure that the same thing isn't going to happen down the line? I think AI could definitely be one, of course. When there's no water left, anyone that used AI is going to be considered to be completely like luxurious and opulent. But maybe the same will be said for content creators in general. Maybe I'll look back at this as a job and feel ashamed that I used to create content designed to keep people on a platform that was innately unethical. Anyway, stay tuned till the end. When we say addiction, people also jump to substance addiction, which is a large part of it. Yes, of course, all the way back from the opium crisis. But addiction can come in other forms as well. Some key examples being gambling, gaming, even sex addiction is a thing, which goes to show that it's not just about a certain chemical that has a reaction to our brain and how our brain reacts to certain stimuli.
You can't look at a sports program without seeing gambling being promoted. And also, gambling is promoted on the phone like 24/7. You now have bookies who are actively promoting gambling to teenagers. Even though this was a young kid, he was doing essentially a lot of the things that we see adults who struggle from compulsive gambling go through. Manipulating, lying, conning people out of money so that they can feed the habit. I have to continue gambling to try to get out the debt. For a kid, when they see that it's not possible, their mindset is, I don't want to live anymore, because there is no way out of it.
Addiction is defined as a disorder resulting in compulsory behavior. Addiction is a neuropsychological disorder characterized by a persistent and intense urge to use a drug or engage in a behavior that produces an immediate psychological reward despite substantial harm and other negative consequences, which is a wider frame of a definition than I think most people would imagine. The existence of gambling addictions and gaming addictions and etc., to me, gives evidence to the fact that the human brain can get caught in these cycles without intending to, and it's not necessarily just the external chemical added, but the atmosphere around you that can get you addicted. And it was knowing that helped me understand about sugar and how quitting sugar is also a state of mind rather than just cutting out the drug itself, because sugar is also a drug, which we'll get back to. I myself have never experienced any of these kind of addictions like gambling or gaming. The only one I can think of would be this kind of content creation side of things. And it's the correlation between the behaviors I see in myself with watching too much content that I also see with things like sugar and things I've actually tried to give up and have done so and have seen what the outcome is like, that has made me want to talk about this today, because there are correlations. The way I open up the YouTube app and just keep scrolling is a behavior. It's what that app must do for me. It's what opening it on a tab on my laptop must do to my brain. There's no chemical exchange. There are not only on specifically YouTube in this example, there are not only more sponsored videos that are then innately just adverts, but there is more AI slop. I listen to music on YouTube quite frequently, sometimes as background music. I have to really double check if I'm listening to AI music. There's a great channel, I've commented about them before, Editing Me, just find them and put them in, I can't remember the name, but there's like a couple and they specifically make non-AI music. But that has to also be an intention behind that action. Like I can't just relax and assume I'm not listening to AI when it might happen. Specifically with shorts as well, like if you're just going through shorts, the amount of AI that you will see has become much more like numerous in quantity. Also, I won't say harder to work out because it's not the kind of AI I'm talking about. I'm talking about a random clip of a film that I remember from the 90s with a really shitty description underneath, and I'll just watch this random scene happen. My husband always absolutely makes fun of me. He's like, what are you watching this random thing? Either watch the film or stop. Chances are probably just going to be a random kind of generated channel behind the scenes. It's not actually a real person. Unlikely, at least. We don't know in general cases. But like if you're just watching a random scene of Grey's Anatomy for 20 seconds with a description that doesn't really say anything at all, it's the same thing. It's AI slop. It's dead internet theory. So to tie it back to the content of this video essay, is content creation in itself still ethical? We're designed to keep you on this platform. If you're seeing this video, it's because my channel is doing well enough to be pushed out on the algorithm, which means I am retaining your attention long enough for YouTube to deem me successful. I'm therefore keeping you on a platform that pushes also AI content. So I am still innately in the AI industry, even if I want to assume that I'm better than that. Even if I'm not specifically making Love Island fruit AI slop, or I'm even talking about it critically, I'm keeping you on a platform that pushes it as well. So unless YouTube or Google or any of these other companies suddenly tomorrow wake up and say, actually, let's get rid of AI off our entire platform, I'm still part of the same zeitgeist. And that's something I will have to grapple with in the future ethically. And I'm obviously grappling with now. But for me to be successful on this app, I have to keep you here. I have to keep you watching. And if you are still watching at this point, I'm successful in doing so. But thank you also because I appreciate you. But it's me that benefits from that, maybe not you. So there is this innately unethical bond between us that I don't know how to grapple with. It's like owning a wine bar in the city and you get someone coming in at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday and you're thinking to yourself, is she here for the Chardonnay or is she here for the dopamine? And you serve that person and they go off on their day and you don't know if she's gone to another bar or if she's gone home to her kids. As the bar owner, there is something innately unethical about that. And maybe I'm kind of, my neurodivergency is showing a bit too much. And this is kind of maybe an obvious thing that people have kind of moved on past and understand. There's no ethical consumption under capitalism. Yes, I know. That doesn't take away our responsibility for being on the unethical side. If my granddad used to sell tobacco for a living, I would judge him for that. I would judge him for knowing it was bad, selling it to people and causing them harm. What makes me any different? Creating content for you to sit and be slowly but surely addicted to. Making on a platform that's moving further to fascism every week. Am I not a part of the problem? Last but not least, the same poison that they use to fuel rockets and kill bacteria is one widely consumed as a socializing beverage. Alcohol addiction, I think, is probably one that has the most stigma, up there with like gambling addictions and drug addictions. It is the drug that does so much harm outwardly in society. If you smoke a bunch of weed, you're probably just going to fall asleep and go to bed. If you drink too much alcohol at a bar, you're going to make a scene. You're going to maybe get rowdy, get angry. And if you consume alcohol for your whole life, there are various health difficulties that you're likely to face. Alcohol has become less popular with Gen Z, and maybe that's to do with all of their parents having so many problems with it. I know a lot of people that don't touch alcohol have alcoholic parents or an alcoholic person in the family, and they've seen the negative effects that the drug does to them and they abstain. I gave up alcohol and sugar for 2 years, a few years ago, and it was a life-changing, one of the best 2 years of my life, which we'll get back to. But for now, one thing that really strikes me is how when COVID happened in 2020, which was 6 years ago, my goodness, the rate of alcohol consumption went up tremendously, where people were at home more. People working from home, people would start having a cheeky bevy from 2 p.m. on Friday, and the data shows that alcohol consumption is different depending on each country. So what does that mean? Well, a lot of the stigma between alcohol addiction and other forms of addiction is that it's like an innate gene in your body. If you're an alcoholic, it's just because you just are unlucky. You rolled the wrong dice and you have that unlucky, I'm an alcoholic AA gene. But that's not quite the case. The drug alcohol can be addictive to anyone at any point. It's a certain set of circumstances that makes it go from being a harmless drug that you can use recreationally or one that will become addictive and cause your brain to want it more and more. A lot of people define it as any ingestion of alcohol makes you susceptible because it's a poison. So I think a lot of people don't realize that there are people out there that just don't touch alcohol at all. So any consumption of it is dabbling with alcohol usage disorder, because why would you just ingest a poison? Like, I don't smoke. That doesn't mean I have the odd cigarette on the weekend. It means I never touch cigarettes. Why would I put that in my body? And yet I'll happily drink wine petrol, like crazy. Talking about it is a difficult subject because people don't like to be stigmatized in the same vein. But I think we have to take away that stigma, because the stereotypical alcoholic on the street that's homeless and stuff it's more of a set of circumstances. There's no difference to that than a group of 40-year-old wives meeting up for a brunch on a Tuesday afternoon and having a glass of wine with lunch. That's the same. Just because your class is different doesn't mean that the use of alcohol suddenly is acceptable. But if the increase in drinking at home and alcoholism can occur from something like COVID and the lockdowns happening, it proves that there isn't just an innate gene within us, that it can be a certain set of circumstances in society or around you that can push you towards drinking more. If you have a group of friends that never touch alcohol, you're far less likely to do so. Or if you are, like me, introduced to alcohol with your friend group at like 16, and the thrill of Friday night is to go and find, a Bacardi Breezer and have it in the park, then you're going to have an entirely different experience with alcohol. I think there's much more about our society and its connection with having people drink, especially if you're British, and stereotypically British people drink a lot. It's like our whole entire image. There's basically way more to be said about what it means to be an alcohol user. And a lot of that might be some uncomfortable facts that people don't quite want to face.
Alert Legal Eagles! My law firm, the Eagle Team, is suing Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, and other social media platforms for social media addiction.
Now we need to talk about the Legal Eagle video with regards to the recent cases against Meta and YouTube about social media addiction. It talks explicitly about the addictive nature behind social media and how it was purposefully made that way by the corporations that created them.
After 9 days of deliberations, jurors found that Meta, aka Instagram and Facebook, as well as other social media platforms, had been negligent in designing social media platforms like Instagram, knew or should have known that the design or operation was dangerous when used by a child, that users would not realize that danger, and failed to warn about that danger. All of them make similar core claims that Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, and others deliberately engineered their platforms to addict minors, and that the companies knew it.
And of course, Legal Eagle never failed to bring in the audience to also sell their own services as a legal team. But in this situation, it actually makes sense because they are opening a Class 8 lawsuit in which anyone can also apply to say that I have been affected by my use of social media and I feel like I am addicted to it, I have lower self-esteem because of it, or any number of other issues. And Legal Eagle actually implore people to get involved and tell them their stories.
If you or your child spent years on social media and struggled with anxiety, depression, self-harm, eating disorders, or other serious mental health issues, you should hear this. Because for years, social media companies told us their platforms were harmless ways to connect with friends and family. But this lawsuit, and more like it, have uncovered evidence that these companies knew their products could be addictive and could contribute to serious mental health harms, especially for young people. And now juries are starting to hold them accountable.
On the 11th of April in 2008, Mark Zuckerberg first addressed teen addiction with regards to Facebook. From Fox Business, Mark Zuckerberg was seen talking about how they don't have any consultants that would create such thing as a dopamine loop.
I'd like to talk a little bit about social media addiction. You started your comments today by talking about how Facebook is and was founded as an optimistic company. As a dad, do you worry about social media addiction as a problem for America's teens?
Well, my hope is that we can be idealistic but have a broad view of our responsibility. To your point about teens, this is certainly something that I think any parent thinks about, is how much do you want your kids using technology? At Facebook specifically, I view our responsibility as not just building services that people like, but building services that are good for people and good for society as well. So we study a lot of effects of well-being of our tools and broader technology. And, like any tool, there are good and bad uses of it. What we find in general is that if you're using social media in order to build relationships, right? So you're sharing content with friends, you're interacting, then that is associated with all of the long-term measures of well-being that you would intuitively think of. Long-term health, long-term happiness, long-term feeling connected, feeling less lonely. But if you're using the internet and social media primarily to just passively consume content and you're not engaging with other people, then it doesn't have those positive effects and it could be negative.
We're almost at time, so I want to ask you one more. Do social media companies hire consulting firms to help them figure out how to get more dopamine feedback loops so that people don't want to leave the platform?
No, Senator, that's not how we talk about this or how we set up our product teams. We want our products to be valuable to people, and if they're valuable, then people choose to use them.
Are you aware of other social media companies that do hire such consultants?
Not sitting here today.
Fast forward to 2026, this year, where Mark Zuckerberg is back in court, talking about how certain platforms that he has created have purposefully been made to be addictive to young kids and people that use it.
Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg arriving at a Los Angeles courthouse today to a barrage of cameras and grieving parents from around the country. Parents who say the social media empire Zuckerberg built is purposely addictive and dangerous for kids.
The intention of the company was to prey on teens, exploit them so they can make greater profits.
The tech giant and Facebook founder combative at times on the stand, dismissing the idea that his main goal was to maximize the time teens spent on Instagram, saying that's not how we run the company now. Zuckerberg repeatedly confronted with company presentations and internal documents suggesting he's known for more than a decade about the popularity of the app among young children. One report from 2015 estimating that over 4 million Instagram users were under 13, while the Meta boss emphasized safety features in place now, like age verification. Meta, which owns Instagram, has denied any blame for the harm that's been alleged by the now 20-year-old woman at the center of this landmark trial, who says she developed depression and anxiety from getting hooked on Instagram as a young kid. And she's not the only one. More than 1,500 lawsuits with similar claims remain pending.
Just like big tobacco, just like alcohol industries, just like all of the industries that know exactly what they're doing and they harm the consumers anyway, the creators of social media know exactly how addictive their algorithms are.
2016 Meta email concluded that parents of teenage users shouldn't be told about content their children were viewing because it would, quote, ruin the product from the start. The implication being that if parents knew what their children were seeing on Meta's platforms, they wouldn't let their children use it. And the jury saw an email from an Instagram employee who wrote that people were consuming Instagram so heavily that they could no longer feel the reward from it. Another employee compared Instagram to a drug and characterized the company as, quote, basically pushers.
And it's not beyond me that Legal Eagle are making a YouTube video calling out the platform YouTube about how bad and addictive its algorithms are.
Plaintiffs also showed the jury internal Google documents that likened YouTube to a casino. And a Stanford University addiction medicine expert pointed to research that concluded the defendant's design features activate the same neurological dopamine pathways as gambling and substance addiction. However, the trial featured substantially more evidence about Meta than YouTube, and the most damning documents seem to come from Meta's own internal emails. Now, obviously, this is a dangerous topic for us to talk about here at Legal Eagle because we primarily post on YouTube, though I would point out that we've never been shy about calling balls and strikes against YouTube in the past. And today is no different. And we will remain zealous in our editorial integrity, and we'll let you know if YouTube takes any adverse action against us.
And it's also not beyond me that I'm making a video about Legal Eagle's video about social media addiction in the form of a video that I'm also adding to the same issue. Are we not perpetuating the same issue as content creators ourselves for our own personal monetary gain? And will we look back at this in a few decades' time like we look at smokers and drinkers and sugar and diabetes and all of these issues? Will we not look back at content to be the same problem?
Hey, just right here. Oh. Okay.
You really thought I was going to clip the mic to my lapel? Of course not. You know I have to hold it. That was my attempt at the viral Netflix sit-down thingy. I don't know why I did it really, but... So, let's get the conversation started, because there are several conversations happening about social media, content addiction, and what that means for the future, specifically future generations and younger people, but adults as well. In today's video, I'm going to cover a wide range of examples in history of other similar addictive things, make connections with content itself, and then talk about the ethicness of creating content like someone like me does on the internet. I hope you stick around to the end, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you take something from it. I really do. Now, in this video essay, I'm talking specifically about content creation, less so much about the content consumption itself and you, the viewer at home, having to feel responsible for what you watch. That's quite literally the opposite of what I'm saying. I'm talking about the creators, people like me, other YouTubers who watch, Hassan Pikers of the world, Carl Kalinski's, anyone, all of my friends. I have a community that make content as well, that we are by default on YouTube designing our content to be more watchable, to keep you on the platform. One of the main metrics that YouTube considers whether your video is doing well or not is audience retention, how much your video is being watched and what percentage, and is that above average or low average. And you can clearly see in the data that YouTube pushes videos that keeps people watching for longer. It also rewards channels that has videos watched in succession. That's why many creators will say, once you finish this, click on this other video and check out my other stuff. We're all being kind of manipulated by the algorithm, really, to make you stay on the platform and watch as much as you can. It benefits us and our channels individually. And there is almost a bit of me being a bit of a backstabber by kind of talking about the unethicalness of this, but if the platform itself rewards channels that do this, and the platform itself is innately unethical and is designed to be addictive to keep people watching longer, then we are innately adding into that mess.
All of them make similar core claims that Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, and others deliberately engineered their platforms to addict minors, and that the companies knew it. And what happened in California might just be the beginning of a reckoning for social media giants that kind of looks a lot like what happened to Big Tobacco 50 years ago.
I got a better idea. Let's take a Winston break. That's it! Winston is the one filter cigarette that delivers flavor 20 times a pack.
A creator I found that did a video essay on the tobacco industry is Jake Tran. Now, some of you already have some stuff to say, just bear with me, okay? It's coming.
So you're the tobacco industry in the 1900s. You're the maker of the perfect product. Cheap, accessible, easy to manufacture, and incredibly addictive.
Winston is the one filter cigarette that delivers flavor 20 times a pack.
Jake Tran, in his video, talks about how there were starting to be some legal cases coming out about how tobacco was linked with patients getting lung cancer. And to smother this and hide this, Big Tobacco did various things, but it was kind of undeniable at that point that these cases were going to be groundbreaking cases that were therefore used in, you know, everyone that had lung cancer could also kind of connect it to the smoking if they smoked, and it would be a class action lawsuit kind of vibe.
But then something happens that threatens your entire tobacco empire. Two reports published in 1953 and 1964 prove that there is a direct link between smoking and cancer. And these were no ordinary reports either. They came straight from the president of the American Cancer Society and the US Surgeon General. You need to sow doubt and disbelief. You need to make people want to believe your side of the story. Your solution? One of the greatest marketing ploys to ever fool the public.
Jake also talks about how eventually, after the soldiers of war were given cigarettes and there was no longer a market to sell them to, Big Tobacco moved on to selling to women and shaped it as a feminist narrative to give women equal rights as men. Women are allowed to smoke as well, which, if you think about it, is just so abhorrent.
During the war, cigarettes and tobacco weren't a luxury. They were being subsidized or handed out for free as part of the tobacco industry's patriotic duty. And when those soldiers came back home, well, they were already addicted to nicotine and became customers for life. It also happened to be the age of women's rights. So what better way to get women to smoke than by taking the feminist angle? By smoking, you're taking back your freedom and power from men, from the patriarchy. By smoking, you're challenging male power.
Jake Tran then makes a bit of a jump by saying the marketing behind the Big Tobacco did so successfully because it jumped on trends in a way that sounds like that's a good thing. And then he does an ad read for trends.
In cutthroat industries like tobacco, new ideas are constantly being bounced around for how to make more money or how to get more people to buy your products. And that's true for almost every other industry in existence today. Jumping on a new trend or craze before it blows up is what makes people millionaires, maybe even billionaires. And if you don't have the pleasure of being in elite circles, that is where Trends comes in. Trends is probably one of the most valuable yet unknown knowledge hubs on the internet for aspiring entrepreneurs.
Anyway, more on Jake Tran. After some light research as to whether it's ethical to use him in a video essay, I also found various people calling Jake out for being an unethical content creator. For example, someone, Bill's YT, I imagine YouTube, talks about how Jake Tran would make a video about how bad NFTs were and then literally sold his own NFTs, allegedly.
Were going great for Jake. When he ended 2021, he had 800,000 subscribers, but on February 5th, 2022, Jake Tran uploaded a video titled The Evil Business of NFTs. This was a video where Jake Tran talked about rug pulling in crypto and how to avoid it, but during the same video, he would promote another NFT called Cutting Wolf Society NFT. This rubbed people the wrong way, with the top comment stating, "For a channel funded on exposing the world's biggest scams, Jake's support of NFTs feels like something straight out of an Onion article."
Again, to tie into today's video topic, there are various forms of ethical content creators, and I think sponsorships and ads for certain companies absolutely ties into it. I remember seeing the Tabernacle not go with a specific sponsorship because it was funded or related to the state of Israel, and I've gained so much respect for someone that is capable of doing that and saying, hold on, I don't want to take this ad read, it's unethical. Some of my problematic faves are still reading out BetterHelp ads, and I'm just kind of like, okay, we'll just kind of have to slide past that, but how far does it go? I've had the odd invite to have a sponsorship for the first time on this channel recently, and I'm not sure if I want to cross that boundary because there's kind of no going back, is there? Carl Kalinske, all you can say about him as a creator, he is another one that says no sponsorships, just the ad revenue from YouTube to keep myself independent and not swayed by anyone. And when we're looking at things like all of the money in APAC and all of the corporations behind things, can taking certain sponsorships be deemed as unethical? Maybe. Yes. Depends on the sponsorship, I'm sure. But again, is that a conversation that's also going to change down the line? At the moment, we can clearly define what's unethical and ethical, but in 20 years' time, will those paradigms change?
What if I told you most things in an American grocery store contain too much sugar? Pasta sauce, bread, cereal, milk, yogurt, condiments, dog treats. What if everything was Animal Kingdom?
In David Achu's video, I think we have a sugar problem. David gives some great stats as to how much sugar is in everything, which I think is, again, something that most people aren't aware of.
Mountains of papers and studies and books and articles and videos all about the different ways that sugar affects every part of your body. It can cause fatty liver disease, diabetes, raise your risk for heart disease, risk of osteoporosis, risk of stroke, risk of a lot of other things. And it doesn't take as much sugar as you think it would to do it. A 2013 study found that when you give a population 150 extra calories of any kind, it doesn't do all that much. But if that extra 150 calories is coming from sugar, which is about as much sugar as one can of soda, it shoots the diabetes risk of that population up by 11 times.
I resisted calling their products addictive because it seemed crazy to me to compare cookies with heroin. And I'm now convinced that in some ways these food products are even more problematic than tobacco, alcohol, even some kinds of drugs.
That was Michael Moss.
There are a few doctors that I've followed that have almost been the whistleblowers as to how bad sugar is in modern day life, and they have been kind of suppressed and stuff, and they're not as popularized, but the word is starting to get out, which is, in my opinion, good to see. I think people should be educated on how bad sugar is for them.
In the mid-20th century, heart disease was on the rise. President Eisenhower just had a heart attack, and the people wanted answers. What was making these people sick? Put very simply, there were two ideas. There was the popular idea that the problem was fatty foods, which is backed by famed American nutritionist Ansel Keys, or there was the less popular belief that the problem was actually sugar, and that was backed by British nutritionist John Yudkin. Basically, this was just a big competition as to who could better answer the question, why are people getting sick and fat?
And David also brings up one of my favorite books, Pure, White and Deadly. I have my own copy. I've had it for a few years. It's a fantastic book. It also calls out the sugar industries and organizations and the companies that are trying to make it out that sugar isn't as bad for us as it actually is. And that's a key thing we're going to see in so many of these industries. But yeah, Pure, White and Deadly. I definitely recommend one of my go-to favorite books for like this kind of topic. And John, Yudkin does come up in Dave's video as well, the writer of that book. I think it is also Dr. Ludwig that I'm thinking of that talks a lot about the sugar industry. And I remember watching one of his speeches years ago, and it affecting my life really was one of the key elements as to why I gave up sugar. So yeah, I don't know. Check him out if you want to know more about this.
It also probably didn't help that in the 50s, Sugar Information Inc. was putting out ads that were talking about all the health benefits that come from eating sugar, and that they even won an award for, quote, advertising in the public's interest.
And he also talks about the hyper sugar drinks, which goes towards what I was saying about tolerance of sugar has slowly been raised in modern day life so that we aren't used to the same amount of sugar. And in fact, one result of giving up sugar that I remember was that fruit tasted way more sweet than it does now. And even things like coffee that would usually be a very bitter taste, or like 100% cocoa chocolate, which would usually be really bitter, had much more of like a creamier note to it and was much more like palatable, because my tongue was less used to sugar, which is why people giving up sugar for good also suggest giving up sweeteners and stuff as well, because things like xylitol can still numb the palate, basically.
Pretty much all large drinks sold at every food place in the United States. McDonald's Large Coke, 100 grams of sugar. McDonald's Large High C, 104 grams of sugar. Wendy's Large Watermelon Lemonade, 102 grams of sugar. Popeye's Large Frozen Purple Drink, I couldn't even imagine what that's supposed to be flavored like, 115 grams of sugar. Taco Bell Large Mountain Dew Baja Blast Dirty Soda, 118 grams of sugar. That's just random words put together. And last but not least, friggin' Dunkin' Donuts, with multiple drinks that cost the 3-digit mark. The worst I could find was the large mocha swirl coffee chiller with 148 grams of sugar.
David also talks about the daily limit of what's recommended for sugar. And I think that's also changed as well, which is something we should be aware of, but how we are just way over that amount.
I'm gonna show you a normal day's worth of eating snacks, and I want you to guess at which point you have exceeded your daily limit for added sugar. A mini can of soda, a handful of Oreos, 2 Reese's Cups, fries with some barbecue sauce, and a granola bar. Locked in your guess? All right, let's see. The answer is you get a mini can of soda. So that's it. In fact, you only get 1/4 of an Oreo. That's 25 grams of sugar. That is the daily limit for women. If you're a man, you get to have a few more Oreos. In fact, if you are a woman and you were to eat all of these in one day, you would exceed your daily limit by over 300%.
David also, in his video essay, has a sponsor with quite a seamless ad read, I will say. Get that bag, Dave.
That my beans weren't high quality, which is why I'm so glad that today's sponsor is My Favorite Coffee. My Favorite Coffee? No, I'm just kidding. Remember when Smosh had a coffee brand? Wasn't that weird? No, this video is not sponsored by them. It's sponsored by Current. Current is a banking app that gives you more for your paycheck. If you're anything like me, you're afraid of money. Boom.
Now, David also has talked about the content side of things as well, with other videos like why is it so easy to spend half a day on your phone, and has tackled the same kind of conversations that I'm bringing up today.
It's because you're an addict. That's a joke, but like statistically, maybe not. Apparently that's not just a buzz phrase. Social media addiction is an actual addiction that afflicts apparently about 10% of Americans. So just think about if you ever get really antsy or are dependent on social media and you can't go without it for a day or two, that's when it starts leaning into that territory. Even if you wouldn't consider yourself an addict per se, you're probably more attached to social media than you would like to be. Why is that?
Like how TikTok took away its clock function on the app, so you don't realize how long you've been scrolling for. Social media addiction as a term is things he's already used in his video essays.
Let me show you something. Where did the time go? Like the time and the battery percentage, they both disappeared. Where did they go?
But again, I don't know if I'm making a link between two weak things here, but as creators on the platform, I do wonder what his thoughts would be about how ethical it is for the video essays he's putting out in that place of talking about social media addiction and content consumption. As a creator, does he also feel the same weight of the responsibility that I'm starting to feel now by trying to make this video as watchable as possible? His are snappy, his video essays are incredible, he has great editing and a real good charismatic personality. Does he also realize that he's adding to the same ecosystem that keeps people on these platforms longer than they want to be? I don't know about you, just going from personal experience here for a second. I have also found that the number of podcasts I watch religiously every week is slowly increasing. I find myself getting my news from YouTube rather than news sources. And I find myself clicking on the YouTube tab on my computer when I have nothing left to do, almost like bored fingers finding something to kind of numb the pain of nihilism and apathy. So I click on YouTube and I refresh my page. I actually find looking at thumbnails to be a form of relaxing thing to do, even if I have no intention of watching anything behind it. Seeing all of these different faces and titles and subjects and topics is kind of cathartic in itself, which is innately toxic. Just in the same way that watching short form content continuously on Reels is a time dump, as it were. The same could be said for apps like Facebook. I used to have Facebook, but I deleted it because it kind of has no purpose if you think about it. I still do have Instagram, which we'll talk about that later. But I used to find myself just opening my phone, clicking on the same app, having a look, scrolling through and closing it. Put my phone down, pick my phone back up, opening it, scrolling, having another look, refreshing the page, close the app, put my phone down. And I'm sorry, as someone that also is going to connect this to different forms of addiction and stuff, like some of that habitual action is so close to other addictive natures and qualities. Look at someone gambling at a slot machine, the repetitive habitual nature that they know they should stop. They know it's not really giving them anything or performing any positives in their lives, but they'll still keep repeating it and doing it just out of habit. The action becomes a habit, and then the habit becomes addictive, and then the addictive habit is just impossible to stop doing even if you wanted to. As someone that creates on the internet as well, there is an innate responsibility for me to keep up with content that's being released, and in doing so I have almost justified my need to sit and watch YouTube all day at sometimes if I don't want to do anything else. It's kind of work related. I'm keeping up with the zeitgeist. But it got so bad that I had to at one point kind of double check with myself, like, am I watching this because it's helpful to me, or am I now just sat watching YouTube continuously for hours of my day? Have I done the chores around the house that I intended to do? Have I taken general care of myself, or am I watching an old episode of Do We Know Them because I want something to take my mind off things while I play video games in the background? And I'm also on my phone at the same time with this like 3-screen matrix hyper dystopian system of what I'm doing. The minute you have to reduce something that you're doing out of habit, the minute that you're creating a form of dietary requirement for what you do and don't watch, there's a problem. You already have a problem. That's what we would consider addiction. I think about like tradwife culture and some of the kind of what do I eat in a day kind of healthy diet content, and I wonder if there should be an equivalent for like, this is what I watch in a day. I limit myself to 1 hour of Reels per day and make sure I don't go over for my mental health. I then spend half an hour in the evening before bed listening to a sleep meditation ASMR when it's all bullshit and really they're just completely binging Euphoria. I also watched a video by a great channel, Arts Are in Process, that talks a little bit more about this kind of content creation and content consumption.
I ended up doing the math, and it turns out I spend 97 Canadian dollars and 86 Canadian cents every month to watch videos on the internet, the thing you're doing right now, for free. But the funny thing is that I don't really care about the money. My problem with streaming isn't the cost, it's that it doesn't feel like home anymore.
In it, it's discussed about how organizations like Netflix have progressed to the point that there is so much choice, there is that people are fatigued from all of the choice, and that the streaming platforms and streaming services themselves have developed in a way that has fundamentally changed how we consume content.
But Netflix meant that I could watch what I wanted when I wanted, and it turns out that was all of the time.
I am finally 100% caught up with Castle, and I have no more purpose in life.
They shape my interest and personality in comically obvious ways.
I'm Rick Castle. I really am running the handsome line.
I spend my days exploring different worlds with different characters.
Top 3, by the way, are 30 Rock, Psych, and now Scrubs. No particular order. They're all just so good.
This sort of constancy was only possible thanks to streaming giving me a new way to watch TV. Shows weren't just something I caught when it was on. They were a place to live for a few seasons.
Speaker themselves talks about how much TV they watch, how much streaming services they use, and the hours of the day that goes by. And one thing that definitely came to mind was the jump between, again, millennials will remember, the OGs will know, of how it used to be that your favorite show came out once a week and there was no way you could watch it or binge it in any way. And even if you missed it, you had to either catch the hour like replay channel or like find a recording. Like there was a time in history where you couldn't even like watch it on demand. TV on demand then came out, and it was like a huge step that you could like, you know, watch the program that week that you needed to. But it wasn't until streaming platforms like Netflix came out that you could binge a show. And look at the verbiage of that. Like we would go binge drinking on the weekend. We would also be able to binge our favorite shows. There is the key change of giving the brain as much of something as it wants, that it wants to consume it in a different behavior, in a different way.
I'm eventually going to get up and go edit yesterday's daily vlog and probably just watch the Mindy Project on my second monitor. But that's about all for today. If you want to see me keep making daily vlogs, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you tomorrow.
That was 10 years ago. The only thing that's different is my glasses. My entire life has been making YouTube videos and watching TV, except I'm not watching TV anymore. I'm reaching for my phone to use Instagram instead of watching TV because TV just feels like so much work nowadays. I know I sound cooked, but like I just picture it as browsing, clicking through different apps and titles and watching the sorry excuse for what counts as a trailer nowadays as it autoplays while I'm trying to read the show description. I can't escape into another world because it feels like I'm stuck in traffic trying to get there. But I want to go to there because I love TV.
Something that also runs parallel to this entire conversation, I think, is the end of celebrity culture as we know it, or as my generation knew it. We started with the Hollywood stars, you know, when film started happening in Hitchcock's generation. They were inaccessible. They were almost like gods and goddesses of their generation. You would see them in film and that's it. That then took a step down to being able to read about them in magazines. Celebrities being a little bit more accessible, the kind of interaction with the mass audiences, getting letters from Lizzie McGuire or reading Britney Spears' latest whereabouts in some magazine somewhere. And now we've also seen celebrity culture just taking a dive in the fact that the Kim Kardashians of the world are becoming less relatable. And relatability has become a huge element for what we look for in our heroes, in our celebrities, which is why I think the prevalence of influencer culture and YouTuber culture has become the next stage of that. You can quite literally chat to Hassan Piker and ask him a question in real time. There's never been an age where our heroes have been so accessible. So I wonder what is next, because we're also seeing the move towards deepfakes and AI, in which we're kind of generating our own heroes that become everything that we need them to be. Lonely men are creating AI girlfriends so they don't have to deal with their toxic traits and actually find a human girlfriend. That's, I wonder, going to be the next stage, and that's really frightening because we're also, as human creators, I'm a real person, I don't use AI, I'm not Hank Green. I'm going to actually have to make sure that you know that on your end, and I'm going to have to fight for my ability to be able to keep doing that. There might be a time in which I can't stop someone from making a deepfake of me, and that's quite frightening as someone that is 34 and doesn't want that out there on the internet. But I think the reason why this celebrity culture has shifted as it has is because of money and the profiting that can be made from those stages downwards. The money that companies and industries can make by having you more accessible and celebrities more relatable sells more products. Kim Kardashian's innately, their fortune comes in that celebrity culture, but it's moved down and kind of maybe democratized into the individual influencer and YouTuber mindset. The fact that Hassan Piker is basically an individual that's so popular on the internet, the fact that I, a random woman in the middle of nowhere, can put this video out and be seen by people is a change in culture for sure. And I think that there are certain celebrities that are just losing so much face and like popularity because they are so unrelatable. Like the Gwyneth Paltrow pro-Israel real estate advert is the most detached from mass consciousness thing I've seen all year, and I sometimes just it comes to me in my dreams. Call me Hayley Stevens. Answer in Progress then also does a seamless ad read to resolve the problems that it created in the video essay. We see what you did there. Answer in Progress, nicely done.
TV shows were made when I was a kid during my formative years, just because I haven't had the time to really engage with anything new. So how do we fix this? Well, the same way we always do. With a website made with Hostinger. They've been sponsoring videos on this channel for almost 5 years now. So, I want to get rid of all the decisions that don't matter and focus on the only one that does. What do I want to watch?
And look at how much the views of content and content consumption and content creation have already changed. Just a decade ago, we would see so many family vloggers that not many people, some at the time I'm sure were, but not everyone was talking about how innately unethical that is. Whereas now, much more commonplace is the opinion that any children in a video is innately unethical because they can't consent to that, and when they grow up they won't know if that's what they want their likeness to be out there, especially in a world of AI and demons doing things with that kind of content. A key example of this is another creator I covered on the channel that's grown up now and is talking about how her mum forced her into this kind of situation where she was creating content, and she's grown up and she realizes there's like so many unethical elements to it. I mean, the main one we all know about is the Ruby Frankie child abuse situation, in which that was basically connected to forcing children to make content for them, for their families, so they had money, and we got to see in real time unethical practices and abuse of those children. So what else will be considered unethical another decade from now? What other parts of content creation that we all consider to be completely normal at the moment are going to change in 10 years' time? Is it going to be looked badly on of what I'm doing now, even though at this moment in time, this is just another video essay? One of them, I would like to think, more beneficial things to watch on YouTube than not, compared to Love Island, Fruit, AI Slop. But even still, will my future kids look back at this and judge me for making it? Now, Jessica Kellgren Fozzard, fantastic creator and fantastic channel, did a video essay kind of style video about alcohol, the alcohol industry, and its connections to the LGBT community. In Alcohol and Queerness, a deep dive.
Gay and queer bars have played a fundamental part in the fight for queer visibility. Yet the relationship between LGBTQ+ spaces and alcohol is a complicated and bittersweet one. Drinking can be fun. It can take your inhibitions away, let you jokingly tell your friends about your sexuality or gender, and explore it with plausible deniability before you're ready to come out of the closet. And it also gives you the freedom to be out and proud when you're still learning how. But drinking is also tied to alcoholism and related health problems that are of greater prevalence in the queer community.
In it, they talk about everything from gayness, the quote-unquote the gay bar, as well as stats on how far more likely the LGBTQ community is likely to consume alcohol.
According to Healthline, people who identify as gay and lesbian in the United States are twice as likely to have a severe alcohol or tobacco use disorder as those who identify as heterosexuals. Those who identify as bisexuals are 3 times as likely to have a substance use disorder. This goes even higher to 5 times as likely for those who are unsure of how to label their sexual identity. We have less concrete numbers for trans individuals, but studies show that they are also more likely to binge drink than cis individuals.
Now, Jessica also talks about prohibition in the US and how at a time when alcohol was prohibited, that's where that word comes from, stricter laws on gay and queer communities were also enforced, which kind of, I don't know, rings kind of a bell how things don't change at all, doesn't it?
When everyone was doing something illegal by going out for drinks, there was more buffer room for queer people to go out with the same degree of danger, to a point, as cis and straight people. But after Prohibition, serving alcohol kept being illegal just to queer people. Establishments who served alcohol to LGBTQ+ individuals were considered disorderly houses, and bar owners could lose their license for serving queer customers on the grounds of indecent conduct. Many gay bars operated as bottle clubs, where people were supposed to bring their own drink from home that could then be served by the people working at the bar. Love the concept. Who can pour this for me?
And like Prohibition in the US, where they tried to ban alcohol, or in the UK recently trying to ban social media for under 16s, censorship and making something inaccessible or banning it, making it illegal to use or whatever, is a route that people use. Now, I'm not going to claim to know enough about sociology to even know if that's going to be successful or not. My instinct tells me, though, that if people want to do something, they're going to find a way to do it. Just like Prohibition in the US, and just like the number of young people that I'm sure are still using social media, just because it's been banned doesn't mean they're not going to be able to do it. What I imagine is more likely is that they're going to do it without the safety mechanisms that they should have in place, because if it's banned, then they have to hide the fact that they're doing it. So if you're 16 or under 16 and you're talking to someone who says something inappropriate and they turn out to be an adult, you might be less likely to report it because you're scared that you're actually not allowed to be on those apps in the first place, which does innately tell me that kids are going to be less safe because of this. And to me, that's kind of the point. I don't think necessarily banning things work. Just like how weed has been criminalized for a long time. Therefore, a lot of what you can get access to from drug dealers is a stronger, more potent, unregistered, kind of vetted type of marijuana, whereas if it's in a country that's legal, it can be checked, it can have regulations, it can have things in place to make sure it's acceptable. Instead of banning Instagram for anyone under 16, why don't we make it illegal for Instagram to have an addictive algorithm? Is that so hard to imagine? And instead of banning alcohol for that matter, why don't we have an innately much more supportive community for anyone that needs help with finding out they have alcohol usage disorder? The same for sugar. It should be illegal for companies to add an unhealthy amount of sugar to food without it being overtly communicated to the consumer. But at the moment it's not. There are about 1 million words for sugar, and it's hard to tell what actually is healthy and what isn't. And actually many of the less healthy options just market themselves to be healthier anyway. I think that practice should be banned much more than there should be an individual responsibility on the consumer to decide what they should and shouldn't do. Now, something that I wanted to add in here was how reflective certain alcohol industries and companies are to like what we saw with big tobacco. Specifically, marketing towards women to be feminist. Certain drinks and alcohol beverages have been marketed towards the LGBT community as a way of kind of pretending they're joining in at Pride. It's Happy Pride Month kind of vibe. Things like Absolute Vodka has been marketed towards the queer community. And as much as it was framed a very pink-washed way of, well, this is great, they're happy to market to the queers, it's also, bear in mind, a poison. So what you're effectively doing is further, harming a community that is already oppressed in society by purposefully marketing them a product that's bad for them.
The long-standing connection between alcohol brands and queer nightlife and culture. Absolute Vodka started advertising in gay magazines The Advocate and After Dark all the way back in 1981, becoming the first mainstream brand in a gay publication. And, of course, it became one of the most recognisable sponsors of RuPaul's Drag Race in the 1910s. Yes, the 1910s. It became one of the most recognisable sponsors of RuPaul's Drag Race in the 2010s. There we go. The first national brand to run an openly gay ad, also in The Advocate in 1981, was Boodle's Gin. In the words of an editor of Genre magazine, when Absolute took the risk of placing ads in gay magazines, no gay man would serve anything but Absolute. These ads took Absolute from 5th place to the #1 selling premium vodka in the country. You should drink Absolute vodka, but they show up for the gays. Woo! Maybe I will still get that Coca-Cola sponsorship though.
Also, not Jessica asking for a Coke sponsorship. Like, girl, do you really want that? I hope that you were joking. And even in drag culture and similar communities within the LGBTQI+ community, alcohol and the perforation of alcohol and the selling of alcohol is part and parcel with the job.
I mean, and we work in the drag industry, which, let's be honest, Delta Work always says it, our job is to sort of facilitate the sales of alcohol. I used to do this fabulous trick. I would host drag shows, when you used to host drag shows, like local drag shows? Mm-hmm. And I would be like, all right, whose birthdays are it? Or, nope. Whose birthdays are it?
I wonder if we're going to see a Class A action lawsuit on all drag queens that sell alcohol when we all grow up and we don't have working kidneys. But like I tried to explain as well about the circumstances that create the likeliness of alcoholism to go up, the lives that many LGBTQIA+ people live is just an open door for that kind of addiction. There's the trope of trans women being highly likely to be drinkers because there is a different life that we have to live. And more often than not, it's a sad one. More LGBTQI+ people are likely to be disowned from their friends and their family. I've had that happen to me. One of my best friends at secondary school, I came out to, and she just fully turned around and dropped me as a friend. Like, this is an experience that we take so for granted. And when we are less likely to thrive in society, there's no surprise that we turn to the bottle or any other form of addiction to quite literally numb the pain.
According to University College London in the UK, the prevalence of depression and anxiety disorders amongst bisexual people was 40%, and for lesbian and gay people it was 28%, which was significantly higher than for heterosexuals at 16%. Similarly, illicit drug use was highest amongst bisexual people at 37%, while for lesbian and gay people it was 25%, and heterosexuals at 10.5%. Alcohol misuse was highest in lesbian and gay people at 37%, compared with bisexual people at 31%, and heterosexuals at 24%. Studies have shown that cisgender and transgender populations have a similar rate of risk of developing an alcohol use disorder, although other studies suggest that trans individuals, particularly young ones, are more likely to binge drink than their cisgender peers.
Interesting side note, while I was researching for this section, I came across a Jordan Peterson short, which was quite shocking to find on my feed, but it actually revealed that he used to drink and had a problem with alcohol and now abstains, which is one of his main things, is to like not drink, which, I don't know, I kind of just wanted to add it because it was like, oh my God, even the demonic people on the right, us and human, like, I don't know, let's just remember that from time to time, but yeah.
When I was a kid, I used to drink a fair bit, and I quit when I was about 24, 25, maybe a little later than that. I was out 3 or 4 times a week having just a fine time.
Drinking beer or whiskey?
Yeah. Usually beer. I like beer a lot, but whatever was available, fundamentally.
Anything wet.
Yeah.
It makes sense that he would be so anti-alcohol, even though he's obviously a terrible person and does loads of bad things. But like, I was like, oh my God, that makes sense. He must have drunk before. Now he doesn't. Yeah, things clicked anyway. I don't know why I added that. Fuck Jordan Peterson. Now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail with regards to the 2 years I spent not on alcohol or sugar, or processed sugar. I cut them both out because it was starting to affect my job, my life, my friendships. And I could see like I was becoming a person that I didn't really want to be. I was, a weight I wasn't happy with. I was unhealthy, my skin was bad and stuff. So I decided to first give up alcohol, and then a couple of weeks later, I realized I had started eating so many more sweets, so I gave up sugar as well. And that was when I started to learn about a lot of these industries. It's when I gave up milk and stuff like that. And honestly, in those 2 years, I got to a weight I was really happy with. I changed jobs from a toxic work environment. I moved flat. I cut out people that were not, healthy in relationships in my life. And I was really, really happy. And it wasn't until a little bit of a crisis, which long-term fans of the channel will know about, that caused me to, start, indulging in sugar and alcohol again. Honestly, it was one of the best 2 years of my life, other than when I met my husband. And of course, there's just another array of wonderful. The reason I add this in here is because I want to make correlations between what it's like to be aware of addictions that if you experience not having alcohol and sugar for 2 years, then you know actively what it's like to have them, if that makes sense. I know what the drugs do and don't do to me, if that makes sense. I'm using them a lot more consciously. I want to do the same with content. I want to be way more conscious about how many times I open up Instagram and scroll through reels. I want to be way more conscious of how much time I spend watching YouTube. I want to have control over my life in the same way that I'm aware of how much certain other drugs can take that control away. I feel like content consumption is taking that control away from me as well. And I do feel an innate responsibility as a content creator to be aware of this potentially addictive thing I'm putting out there. If social media addiction and content addiction becomes a wider scale problem, as someone that's quite literally now filming content for you to consume, I have to at least be aware of what my own supply is doing to the world. I need to be aware of what content creation addiction looks like if I'm going to still add it to the ecosystem. Some of the anecdotes that I can definitely remember from specifically giving up sugar and alcohol, but sugar being way more difficult, both practically and with regards to my body's reaction and my brain's reaction. Like giving up alcohol is kind of a thing that we talk about often. There's an appeared stigma of like, oh, she's not drinking anymore. But like, actually, it's something that people talk about quite a lot. And specifically in this modern day era, like it was very much more like, good for you, than it was like, oh, why are you doing that? Sugar, on the other hand, I would have people shout at me. I would have people be like, why are you giving that up? Sugar's not that bad. I'm allowed to have chocolate. And it's like, okay, Barbara, I didn't tell you couldn't have chocolate. Like giving up sugar became much more of a stigmatizing action. It's also way harder to do because sugar is in everything. I found myself eating out in restaurants far less because it was just a ball ache to find somewhere that doesn't do it. I would find a certain place that I could rely on a certain thing, a certain dish coming out that didn't have sugar, and I would go there periodically. I would make my own lunches, which also saved me so much more money than buying it out in the world on my lunch breaks and stuff. There was a huge amount of knockoff effects. I remember accidentally ingesting sausages when I went to my parents' house, and they served me caramelized sausages. And I remember the taste being just wild. Not only just really sugary, but I had a stomach ache and my body didn't know what to do with it. I also remember, sorry, another side note. I remember cutting out sugar subsequent to this, and then my friend from Tokyo came to visit us, and she brought these like Pikachu Tokyo banana like souvenir treats. And I didn't want to be rude, so I had one. The way I had one, and then a second one, and then a third, I'm opening up, like people are still talking, third one. I ingest like 6 of these things and I am bouncing off the walls. It was like I did a way harder drug, let's say. I was like, oh my God, yeah. I couldn't stop talking. And I realized like, wow, this is the sugar that's doing this to me. And we think about that in comparison to like giving kids sweets at a birthday party, that like, they do not have the facility to understand what they're ingesting at that age, and they really shouldn't be. Like, apparently, if sugar was invented now, it would be a class A drug. Think about that. Look that up. Look that shit up. Like, and we have that in everything we eat. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. Giving up sugar was way harder than alcohol. Alcohol was just kind of like, okay, like, you know, I remember getting like tickets, free drink ticket at an event or something, and I would go and get my free drink from the bar and give it to my friend who would happily have another glass of wine, and smelling it and it just smelling like gasoline. It's so surprising how much things like taste buds and stuff change retrospective to the fact. Another tangent, but when I gave up alcohol and sugar, I also learned about the milk industry. Specifically in the UK, milk is pretty popular. Most families grow up with it in their cereal, tea, coffee, everything. I never realised how that milk is usually farmed in the UK. I'm going to talk specifics. I don't know if this is the same case through the whole world. I don't know about every company, but I found that the female cows that can, get pregnant will be specifically made to get pregnant so that they can breastfeed, make milk, produce milk. Their children will be taken away from them and they will just be forced to continue to produce that milk. After that, sometimes they can be slaughtered straight away for food. And this is done en masse. I never knew that as a kid. And when I found that out in my early 20s, I was so shocked that I couldn't drink any milk anymore. And since that day, I haven't ingested any milk by choice. I moved to soy milk, different forms of more ethical milk. In doing so, I found out I was lactose intolerant. I found out that this whole time that milk had not been good for me, especially growing up. Your body can get lactose intolerant throughout your life. Cutting out milk was something I realized was actually doing my stomach really a lot of harm, and I was healthier for it, and I've been healthier for that. Now I avoid certain dairy, specifically full milk, whole milk. I don't know. For me, that was also just kind of an eye-opening situation, something I had taken for granted in my life that my family had always had. We had always just culturally enjoyed as a British family. Didn't realize how unethically it was being mass-produced. Quit it anyway, because why would I want to be a part of that? And then found out that actually it was bad for me the whole time. That's going to kind of be the theme of this essay today, but I don't know. Do you have a similar experience? If you can, drop in the comment kind of what thing you've given up kind of tangentially and found out actually it was bad for you the whole entire time, if anything. It was a wild 2 years of sugar and alcohol though, and I will never ever unlearn the things I learned from doing it. I think I can say that much. So in conclusion, is content creation ethical? Were it not for the fact that platforms were moving further towards fascism, like we've discussed, and in an ecosystem where rage bait, curiosity farming, and clickbait exists, it's hard to say anything other than it's not ethical. Not completely. And nothing is, of course, but content addiction specifically, social media addiction specifically, is something that I think we're going to see talked about a lot more. So the content creators behind said content, I think, are also going to be held accountable a lot more than they currently are. And many of you will be thinking, well, is it not up to the individual to monitor what content they use? Well, let's digest that a bit more. I also want to talk about giving the individual the responsibility to look after themselves. It's actually something that Finn and I talked about in our weekly podcast with also Bridget and Soul Bunny. Finn really succinctly explained the difference between individuality and individualism. Individualism is in a society in a sense where everyone is responsible for themselves and there is no community, there is no group consciousness. And the kind of polar opposite to the phrase, it takes a village. It takes a village to raise children. It takes a village to keep people healthy, to educate generations. It takes a village. It can't just be done on a single person's efforts, nor should it be. And I think a large issue with our late stage capitalist neoliberal family setup is that it's your single responsibility to feed, work, look after yourself, take care of yourself and your family around you, and you're just closed off from everyone else down your street. The kind of stereotypical American suburb is a key example of that. And there are so many other successful cultures and civilizations that have been much more of a group consciousness with their mindset and how they do things, that have thrived much more than they have survived. Certain elements of Japanese culture, where we are here, is much more of a group consciousness mindset. Our neighborhood gets together every 2 months to do a random kind of event or group thing, just to check in on everyone, make sure everyone's okay. Even living in the city from a year or so ago, there was nothing like that. I didn't even know my neighbour's face. We would avoid each other. If there was someone going outside, you would wait in your door until they've gone so you don't have to get anywhere near to them. Even within the same country, there's an entirely different element of individualism. So tying that to addiction and content creation and content consumption, if your instinct is to say, well, it's up to the person to be aware of what they're watching, or if they're watching too much, or if they're on their phone too much, it takes away certain levels of responsibility from the platforms that are innately harmful and are intending to be harmful. But I also think that the setup of these organizations and the infrastructure that surrounds them is not meant to be something that a single person can fight on their own. Long story short, I don't think it's that simple. Just like if someone has an addiction to drugs or alcohol, it's not entirely their single responsibility to just get better. It takes a village, it takes a community. There are also so many systems in place that are not, I think, innately healthy for humans to just have to grapple with, especially in this late stage capitalist madness that we live in. Having a shop that sells alcohol on every single block and most social events entertaining alcohol and being sold to it is a nightmare for people that are trying to avoid alcohol. It can also be naturally ostracizing if you're the only one that doesn't drink, and there's a peer pressure within society that is not that one person's individual responsibility. It's a responsibility of society to realize that actually everyone is partaking in poison, and that one person that doesn't want to drink shouldn't have to feel pressure to also be partaking in a gasoline.
Taste the notes of fruit, floral, and nut, and I was like, bitch, where? This is straight up gasoline.
This is gasoline douched out of a horse's...
This becomes especially prevalent when we're talking about kids, children, anyone that hasn't fully developed their frontal lobe yet. For them to have to take the responsibility of being in charge of their own content diet is an absolutely wild thing to suggest. There's no way that someone as young as a teenager or a 12-year-old or a 7-year-old that has access to these absolutely addictive algorithms is going to have the capacity to say to themselves, you know what, Mum, I've watched enough Teletubbies for one day. I think if I watch any more, it's going to slowly chip away at my brain and I won't be able to function later in society. No, they're going to, like most children, like most adults, want more and more of the same thing that's giving them a dopamine hit, and they're not even going to know that they're subconsciously making that decision. I don't think it's your individual responsibility stands when we're also living in systems that are designed to bypass that. Companies have quite specifically designed these systems to make us want to stick on these platforms, to make us want to watch more, to make us want to have another drink at the function, to make us want to eat another cheeseburger. Why do you think all of the sugar is added to the drinks in McDonald's and the chips are so salty? It's the complete, quite literally defined as the sweet point. It's meant to bypass our ability to say, you know what, I've had enough. If it were that easy, I think we would have a much healthier nation, let's be so for real. A roll-on effect of all of this that we can also see is the depleting attention spans, especially in younger children and younger generations. There are teachers that are reporting that kids do not have the same attention span that they used to, or that we did when we were younger. Even myself, especially doing this work as a YouTuber and watching so much content to keep up with the zeitgeist like I've talked about, I find myself never reading anymore. I really should be, because that's also something I should be doing for my job, especially as a leftist. But I find it so difficult to find the time to sit down with a book and just read. It almost feels like a waste of my time when I could be watching a video essay that can tell me it quickly. And I miss reading, quite frankly. I used to love reading, but I have so many books just piling up that I can't, my brain is not in the same position to get to. And honestly, even if I were to, I know my phone would be next to me and I would be checking Instagram every 20 minutes. It's quite scary. It's scary to see that change in myself, and I'm sure there are many of you watching at home that have seen a similar change. I do, though, also believe that platforms hold the majority of the responsibility. An algorithm can be made to be addictive or it cannot be. A business's goals can be to keep younger children online longer, or it cannot be. And I think that we often forget to blame corporations for the simple choices that they don't need to be making, at the detriment to their users and society as a whole. But there is also some responsibility in the creators themselves. If I opened a bar and sold poison in the form of alcohol, I am perpetuating the issue of alcoholism in society. If I opened a cake stand in a market and I added high sugar foods to my line of products, I would be adding to the diabetes crisis in the world. I do think the petty bourgeoisie element of this has to be taken into consideration. And there is a lot of self-reflection that I've had to face to make this video. Is it poking a bear? Have I got friends in the industry that will see this and not want this topic to be raised? Am I going to lose friends from this? Or am I completely out of the mark and no one agrees? And well, even if no one agrees, does that technically even still make it wrong? On that note though, let's talk a little bit about relativity. I will give myself a little bit of a break, and at this point I want to talk about relativity. It's something I try and add in a lot of these video essays to make it clear that I'm not just saying some big nebulous issue and leaving you with all of the pieces to pick up. Like, I obviously know there is a huge difference between content creators and their ethical nature. I personally, as someone that tries to make entertaining, slightly educating, thought-provoking content in a video essay long form system, I find that in my mind to be more acceptable than an AI generated shorts about, you know, Love Island fruit and the kind of comparison to that. And I mean, it's a comparison often used, but even the you know, no effort reaction videos where someone's just pointing at something and you just scroll past it. You know, there is a difference between content creators, and I'm hoping to be on the more ethical side. But would we say that about cigarette sellers a few decades ago? Like, oh, but my tobacco is the healthy one. Like, at the end of the day, if I'm keeping you on this app, then I'm still part of the problem. But what about people's right to watch this content? What about free will? What about people's autonomy? Now, not to get too philosophy tube on you all, but isn't free will a bit of a myth? Because like with the sugar conversation, Dr. Ludwig, I believe it is, talks about how your brain has made the decision to ingest sugar before you've even thought about it. I know, as someone that has struggled with addiction in some ways, certain parts of my behavior make it clear that the actual thing itself is not always necessarily what I'm craving. It can be the situation that thing provides me. If I want a glass of wine and there is none in the house, I will be thinking in myself, oh, I should go and get some wine. I must go get some wine. And then when I go and buy a bottle of wine, on the way home, I may already be calm. I may already be like, okay, cool. Well, I got my wine, so it's fine. Before I've even ingested anything. The existence of things like gaming addiction, gambling addiction, sex addiction proves that it's not just about that chemical that we crave. It's about the state of happiness that chemical brings us, or that the idea that that chemical is coming brings our brain. Ergo, we don't necessarily have free will if our brain is always 3 steps ahead of us. If the fact that you're telling your brain, I'm going to go and buy a donut when you're craving some sugar, is enough to alleviate your brain from the stress of not having that sugar, then the actual chemical itself isn't the problem. A really key example about this is tobacco, and how people will say if they're addicted to tobacco that they have to have a cigarette, say every hour. That's their quota. But then they'll perfectly be able to go to sleep and sleep for 7 hours of the night. They're not going to wake up every hour and need a cigarette. That chemical is not necessary for them. But the belief that it is enough to perpetuate the addiction. Same thing on flights, for example. You physically can't smoke on a 7-hour flight or 12-hour flight. And people manage it. Smokers might be stressed, yes, but they're not dependent on that drug. But their mindset is that they are. And it sadly is much more of a mind over matter thing than people realise. But with regards to content, how it's everywhere around us. It's on our phones, it's on our computers, even at work. I've had jobs that have needed me to tie my old Facebook account to a business one so that I can do my job. Think of how toxic that is if you are addicted to social media. Is it the same to say that we have free will to just not use these apps? I need WhatsApp to talk to my family in the UK. There's no other, well, I mean, there are other ways I could talk to them, but that's the main one I use. There is an element of how these companies and social media and these organizations has made its way embedded into our society on purpose so that it can't easily be eradicated. So do we have free will? If a kid goes to school and every other kid has a phone, is it fair to not give that kid a phone too? Otherwise they might get bullied. Or is it fair for all of the parents to give their kid a phone, everyone, so that all the other kids also feel they have to have a phone? Explain to me what free will is then, because I don't think that we live in a world where free will exists just like we assume. When you go down the street, adverts are playing. You're forced ads throughout the day, a tremendous amount, higher than it's ever been in history. Do we really have free will in the same way we think? All this to say, I don't believe it's entirely our responsibility as the end consumer to what our actions are. There's way much more forced on us than we understand. I think something that also deserves to be spoken about is the addition of nihilism and apathy to an addicted mindset. Now, this is all kind of me just spitballing my opinion, so don't take this as fact or anything. I'm not a health professional. I'm not going to sell you vitamins, but it's way harder to get over something that I know is bad for me when there is no outcome at the end that I'm aiming for. In this late stage capitalist dystopian nightmare that we live in, it's really hard to give up sugar and go for a healthy alternative when you're worried that World War III is going to break out at any point or we're going to be blown up by nuclear bombs. There are genuine threats of climate change that are going to affect our lives, and it's really hard to give a shit about going for a healthier vegetable option in the restaurant when who knows if we're going to have it tomorrow. And it's that mindset that I think is making this entire situation worse, specifically with things like social media addiction and all of the other forms of addiction. Honestly, it's hard to care. And I've met people in my life, specifically in the tobacco smoking addiction generation, that said, they're living their later years, they don't really care about being healthy anymore, and they're going to enjoy their last few years when they can. That apathy, that nihilism affects the want to get over certain addictions. Now, apply that to a 12-year-old that's lived with social media, that doesn't know any life outside of having social media and doesn't know any difference. How are they going to be able to battle the internal dialogue of saying, hey, is this content good for me? Should I be watching it? When they don't even know an alternative. Most of us can remember a time that we weren't addicted to cigarettes or alcohol, whatever our poison is. So we can at least tell ourselves, well, we existed without it once. How on earth are the younger generations that are given iPads from 2 years old going to know a life without social media? And how are they going to be able to foresee that? Therefore, how are they going to want that for themselves if it's for their greater good or for their better good? It's frightening to be that generation of millennials that knows what it was like to have to print out a map to go to the party because we didn't have phones and we didn't have Google Map, and also see AI being thrown at us and children using ChatGPT. The disconnect is crazy. We've come so far so quickly. Where is it going? And in a system and in a world where there is no one really looking out for us, laws are just given to protect capital, police are just there to maintain the status quo and oppress certain minorities, we have to look out for ourselves and our own community. But that's a really hard thing to do. It's quite frightening to say that. I don't even know what I would do if my child had a gaming addiction. I don't know. The only instinct I have is what my parents taught me, it would be to just stop them from playing it. But does that fix the problem? Potentially, if my child ever grew to have a gaming addiction, is it because of the life I facilitated for them having something missing? I don't think that there are the resources that we need to battle these issues, in my opinion, in society today. America don't even have healthcare, let alone fucking addiction crisis facilities. When you get half a day off from your busy week of working in this crazy world we live in, if you want to spend it on your phone all day in your bed, or however Gen Z do, I don't even know anymore, then you kind of deserve to. There's nothing anyone can say about you doing that. I've done it myself. I do it too much. The question becomes, like, if that's a net negative for you, then like, what does that mean? Are people aware that that's a net negative for them, or are they doing it not knowing the harms? I guess that's the bare minimum we can ask for. Can we be at least educated on how bad things are for us, so we can make an educated decision when going into it, rather than going into it blindly, not knowing the harm it could be doing to us? And of course, the apps and social media and these companies are not going to want us to know that. Just like Big Tobacco tried to hide how bad it was to be a smoker, just how the alcohol industry does exactly the same thing and tries to fluff everything up with adverts of like wine drinking with flowers in the background. It's like, you're ingesting gasoline. You're ingesting the same chemical that they fly rockets with. You're ingesting rocket fuel. It's not a little kiki out with the girls. It's a drug. It's a poison. Aegon Targaryen. Do you know that? In the Dance of the Dragons, Aegon Targaryen plays a key role. If you know, you know. And if you know at 8. So, because I don't really have the ability to make up other people's minds for them, for the conclusion of this essay, I'm going to show rather than tell. I've decided to go on a diet. I'm going to cut out alcohol and sugar like I once did, but this time I'm going to include content in there as well. Now, I've already deleted Facebook. I never really got into Snapchat, never really had Twitter, and I wouldn't get it now if my life depended on it. So really, my only indulgences remain to be YouTube and the odd Instagram Reels. I will be giving those up for a month. In exchange, though, because of my job effectively and also some form of responsibility to society, I'm going to allow myself an hour per day to keep up with the news. Now, ideally, I will do that via news websites rather than short form or long form content, but if I have to, I will limit that to an hour per day, which still seems like quite a lot, but considering the current numbers I'm flying with, it's going to be a big change indeed. Now, I'm also going to give up alcohol and sugar because I've done that before, and I want to see the correlation between those things. A large part of this essay is making a connection between the addictive natures of content versus, opioids and sugar and stuff like that. And I've given up alcohol and sugar completely for 2 years before, and I know what it did to my body, and I know how it felt. I know that sugar was far harder to give up than alcohol, actually, because sugar is in everything. So I'm excited to see where content also lies in that as well. They often say if you give up one form of an addiction, you kind of have a likeliness to get others. And I remember first giving up alcohol and binging on sweets and not really making the connection in my head. So it will be interesting to see if giving up all three gives birth to some new issue that I have to then find. Maybe I'll start smoking. Maybe the next video you'll see of me, I'll be puffing up a whole pack a day. But I want to do this kind of social experiment to kind of put some proof in the pudding of this video essay, and also because there's some personal stuff going on in my life where I can't really put a video out twice a week like I once used to. So I want to do this kind of everyday documentary style, kind of see what's going on in my life and put that into a video probably about a month from now and kind of show the progress of that. We'll see how successful I was. We'll do a kind of vlog style, see what it's like to give up alcohol, sugar and content. And I'm going to have so much to catch up with. I'm almost dizzy just imagining the amount of podcasts I'm going to need to sit and watch. So that brings me to the end of today's video. If you did manage to stick around to the end, I really do personally appreciate you, and I hope the time that you spent doing so was valuable to you, and I hope that you're here in a happy and healthy way. I'm really trying to be more conscious about that going forward, so I am going to kind of keep this in mind when I make further content, and maybe even will start making stuff for me. And if it's still put out there and received well, then fantastic. Like, I've really enjoyed talking about Dropout. I enjoy covering the news of transgender icons in the media. I will continue to do that in some form, but maybe I'll stop worrying too much about keeping it hooky or algorithmically pleasing. But if you did stick around to the end, I do still really appreciate you. Of my patrons and my members that pay to help me out and make this content, I appreciate you tremendously. You're all my friends. And I hope that the small community that we have together is worth it, is exciting. It's tiny in comparison to other creators, but it's also huge in comparison to many others as well. I won't belittle my place, as well as also keeping myself humble in the space that we're in. I do hope that we look back in 20, 30 years time and what I'm doing now is still considered ethical, and you're still happy with the bargain that we have between creator and viewer. I hope that this is still going to be okay at that time frame. Does that make sense? We're probably going to have bigger fish to fry as well, knowing the way the world's going, but still, that's for another day. If you want to check out my other stuff, you can, but it's completely your decision. I feel like asking you to do that, and this video is a bit tone deaf, but keep out an eye for the next video I'm working on. It's going to be a month in the making, and I'm going to monitor giving up content, giving up other things as well, to see the effects it does, to see what changes within me. And I'm really excited to show what happens. I'm still going to document it. I'm still going to film the process. So you're going to get some kind of like documentary style revelation in the pipeline. yeah, I hope you look forward to that too. I probably will still keep up my podcast, so check me out there. We'll be talking about the news that I've had to keep up with. I probably will get most of my news from that podcast as well, with the lovely Bridget, Finn and Soul Bunny. So I will see you there. Otherwise, have a wonderful week, have a wonderful month, take care of yourselves, and I really mean that. Let's all take care of ourselves. It's really hard to do that out there. Put yourself first. It's not a crime to do so. I love you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.